Hello, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the third session of Sunoikisis Digital Classics Spring 2019. Today our topic is geographic annotation of text, and we have three guest presenters here. Antonis Hadjikyriacou from, I don't know, probably I will pronounce wrongly the name of the university, Boğaziçi. And then Sinai Rusinek from Haifa University and Valeria Vitale from Institute of Classical Studies in London. And I'm looking forward to hear what you have to say. Valeria will start with a brief introduction of the lesson. So please, Valeria, go ahead.
Thank you, Maria. Yes, I will start with just a very brief introduction. This class is going to be about creating digital annotations of text, and digital annotation is a process you have already started becoming familiar. And annotation in general is something that scholars have always done. You take a book and you maybe write things on the margin, or underline. You use an highlighter. You use post-its. Imagine now to translate this operation into a digital environment, and what are the different things, the further things that you can do to create annotations, and to keep it to its its very simplest definition. Digital annotations are basically about identifying your digital source, that in our case it's text, but it doesn't have to be a text, and then identifying within the text those bits of the text that are relevant to you, and they can be names of people, they can be names of places, like the examples that we're going to look at. They could be dates, all these entities, let's say, that we can find in a source, we can create annotations about. And how do we create these annotations? We associate these entities in our source to external authorities that help us disambiguating those entities and help us creating standard statements about those entities. There are different tools that are available out there to create digital annotations, and some are specific for particular aspects of the process, or for particular kind of annotations. And today we're going to focus in particular on geographic annotation. And as an example, we're going to look at one particular tool that is the Recogito platform that was developed by the Pelagios project. And it is a free online platform. You may have already heard of it. You may have already experimented a little bit with it. So we usually give a tutorial of how to use Recogito and how to create geographic annotations with Recogito. But this time we decided to do something a little bit different. Because one thing about digital annotations is that people are often interested, but then they ask, okay, what is the practical application of these things that I can do? They seem interesting, but I don't really see an immediate practical application in my own research, in my own academic life. So what we decided to do was actually to invite two of our guest speakers and ask them to tell us how they used this tool, how they used Recogito into quite different contexts. So that will give you a little bit of an idea of the flexibility of some digital tools. And then we will close with a very brief demo of Recogito, focusing on, let's say, the more, I don't want to say neglected, let's say less apparent features that are in the platform, and some new things that have been developed recently. So if you have used Recogito in the past, I will show you some things that are very new. They have just been released. I will start this discussion about the actual use of annotation platforms, asking Sinai to tell us more about how she and her team used Recogito in their research.
Okay, hello everybody. I will, first of all, I want to say I'm very happy to participate in this seminar and especially excited to talk about two of my most favorite work environments, virtual offices, we can call it. I'll just share the screen now. Let's see. Oh, and then we have this crazy effect. Let me know if you can see it now.
Yes, we can see your screen.
But still crazy.
Still crazy, yes.
Okay.
Now.
Okay, so I'm in my presentation now. So how to build a gazetteer. I will also talk about what gazetteers are and why do we need them. My talk will also discuss the challenges of the other classical languages. I work on Hebrew and some Arabic gazetteers, and I think these challenges are not only common to our languages, but to anyone who wants to to do geographical annotations and is not working on contemporary English or the languages that have already that people already prepared strong gazetteers for. It will also be useful for anybody who wants to explore a specific geographic phenomena like cities, a specific city, or maybe marine environments, or let's say you want to map farms in a specific area. You will not have your tools for that, and you will need to build them for yourself. So this is I think an analog case to what I'm going to show you. So how do you build a gazetteer based on geographical annotation? I'm using Recogito and OpenRefine. I will speak about Recogito before you will actually have the tutorial. I hope it will be clear enough. And finally, I will show what can be done with a gazetteer beyond just using it to help recognize places. So gazetteers have been there long before our digital age, and maybe one of the more famous ones are Eusebius' Onomasticon, which was really a dictionary of places. And gazetteers can also be used for various motivations. So you can have a gazetteer in order to tell the reader about places that from an environment that is not known to them. So in Eusebius Onomasticon, you have information about places that readers, let's say in throughout the Christian world are interested about, in areas in which they don't live. And the other major motivation to have a gazetteer is linguistic. So down here in the middle, you can see a bit of Rig's gazetteer. It's a modern print gazetteer of the rabbinic place names. Here you have transcription to Hebrew. And just a way of knowing which name applies to which place, or which name aligns with which name, can also be a use of a gazetteer. And of course, in the digital age, we have the added use that with a gazetteer, you can take the various names of places and have information about them, maybe first and foremost the coordinates, in order to map your text or whatever you annotate, put them on the map. So here, for example, we have the maybe most common use gazetteer geonames. And we have a lot of information about these places. We have the place types, we have the hierarchy of the units, the geographical units they belong to, the coordinates, and much more.
Sinai, there is now something wrong with the microphone.
Sorry?
We couldn't hear you for a while.
Okay, so we can search for Lvov, which is the Russian form, or Lemberg, the German form, and find Lviv, the contemporary Ukrainian name of the city. And actually, the most important part in this gazetteer is here on the right. It's the identity number. It's actually the authority file, the authority the unique ID that can link everything we know about this place to this one record. Of course, GeoName is much more, doesn't give us all we need when we come to annotate ancient text or texts throughout the humanities, the various historical periods and thematic and themes. And this is why you will see in Recogito that you can actually upload various gazetteers and connect to them. So you have a gazetteer for the ancient world, mainly Greek and Latin. You have a gazetteer for China. What we are doing in my project, in the project Kima, is building a gazetteer for the Hebrew language, historical gazetteer. So this is not just the case of any language when we talk about Hebrew or Arabic. Some of the most famous travelers, the famous journeys, this is from medieval times, are Benjamin of Tudela and Ibn Battuta in Arabic. And when we want to annotate their journeys and map them, we don't have neither GeoName or the existing gazetteers in Recogito to link to, and this is why this is one reason why we would want to build a gazetteer. And this is how we do it. This is this might be a little bit overwhelming, but this is what you will see later in Valeria's tutorial. This is how we annotate the text. Here we can recognize names in blue, place names in green, and then we can even annotate relations. You will hear more about it later, but if it was English or Latin or Greek, we could do an automatic annotation and recognize automatically all place names, which we will then need to edit and confirm and maybe change in case of error. When I work on Hebrew, I need to do it manually. I need to actually mark this name, which reads Giranda. And then I have to search to mark it as place and then search it by entering the Latin letters instead. So, and then when I print Giranda, when I type Giranda, I have various choices, and in this case, this is the right one. This is Girona in Spain. And only then I can actually link it to the ID that I need. Here it's an ID from another gazetteer. And this is how I map it. This is a lot of work. And of course, I would like to automate some of it. And one way of doing it will be doing the gazetteer. So the project I'm telling you about is actually one of Pelagios, the projects that were supported by Pelagios Resource Development Grant. And it actually started not by an annotation-based gazetteer, but as an attestation-based gazetteer. So a gazetteer that is based on attestations of place names, so a collection of uses of place names in history. But we used not annotations, but rather catalog catalog entries. I will not talk about that. This is something you can read about in Pelagios Commons, in the reports on our project, or in the website, to which I will link in the last slide. But whatever we did is not enough, and we want to enrich our data with annotation, with the use of annotation of, for example, these medieval sources. We hardly have any place names from medieval Hebrew in our database. So for the sake of this seminar, we can assume that I'm starting to build a gazetteer from scratch. So this is how we do it. We annotate a lot of literature that is rich in place names. And then we go to Recogito's download screen, which we will also see in the end. So I'm at the end of the process in Recogito, and then I download a CSV. A CSV is a table, a format that is table-like, and I download it and open it with the tool OpenRefine, which helps me do many very cool things. It's a wonderful tool. I can only give you a very quick promo, and this is how the table looks when I upload it to Recogito. I see the form of, here in Arabic, this is the case of the Arabic data set. I see the form in the second column. I see the form that was annotated. In the left, the form that was linked to it, and also the gazetteer data that we see here. It was connected to the geonames authority files and the coordinates. OpenRefine helps me do things like faceting, for example. Faceting means I can go to the column of the English place names, and I can order them so that I can see which values appear among these 284 attestations, and see which places appear more often, and I can then press on them and do various actions on only these names. And I can also do some work on cleaning the data. When you annotate data, you often have spaces in the beginning or end of a string that and other various phenomena that you need to clean, and OpenRefine helps you do that very easily. It can also do an automatic clustering. It will suggest to you forms that maybe have one letter or two letters difference between them, but are actually the same, and then I can do unification of values that where I choose to do it. And then maybe the most important stuff is do the reconciliation, to connect the attestation, to connect the forms of the place names that I have with external resources. Here you can see reconciliation of the name Odessa with Wikidata, and you can see that if I annotated Odessa in my source, which is a Hebrew story in this case, I know that this Odessa is not the city in Texas, but rather the city in Ukraine. And I have to choose it in order to link to the right authority file. In this case, this is the Q1874. This is my place. So the finding and cleaning and reconciling and correcting to be done after you've extracted all your annotations. There's also a lot of modeling. You have to think a lot about how you build your data, and this is the model that we came up with in the end. So we have places to which our attestations connect. So each attestation is just the appearance of a place name in a text in a specific text, and we have the variants of place names. So a variant can have many attestations, and the variants can also map into one place. So a place has many variants. We are now at the point where we are collecting various data donations from sources where they annotated, whether with Recogito or without, and we are collecting all of these into our database, which today looks like this. It's still in a beta version, so I will not share the link yet, but I hope that we will soon migrate into the GeoKima URL I'm sharing at the end. So we have the places. You can search for a word and then get the details of the place, like you do in GeoNames, for example. But you can also look for all the variants of the place. Of course, our main goal is to make it into a gazetteer that will be inherent in Recogito, so we can then annotate text automatically. But there is also another use to these historical attestations-based gazetteers. You can actually see how the history of the naming of the place, of the toponyms. And this can tell you a lot of things about, in this case, this is the histogram for the variants of the names for Lvov in the Ukraine, and it tells you a lot about the history of the cultural history, the print history, and European history and Jewish history that has influenced the practices of place naming. This is one I like the most because it's the variants of Frankfurt, the names or the ways of writing the name for Frankfurt under mine. And we have actually 48 variants just for Frankfurt and for this Frankfurt, and we can actually only show part of them in this histogram. And this is, I think, where I end my presentation. I will be very happy to answer questions. You can either write to me or use this link to read more about the project. In the coming 2 weeks, I expect that the website that I talked about in here will also be available. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sinai. So now I guess it's Antonis' turn. Or does anybody have questions at this point? I don't see any questions in the chat now, so I think we can move on. Thank you.
Okay. Also, I'd like to thank Valeria for the invitation and for giving me the chance to sort of be here with you today and share my experiences with Recogito. I'm going to be talking more about the experience of using Recogito in class as an educational tool and as a means to introduce students to spatial history. That's my own primary engagement and usage of Recogito and such digital tools. And let me explain what I mean by spatial history. Mainly, I'm referring to GIS, Geographic Information Systems methods and approaches, which, however, I don't consider to be purely quantitative data-based mapping tools, but rather they should be informed and based on an awareness of the cultural critique of the cultural turn. So geographical space or any other kind of space doesn't necessarily have objective or unidimensional aspects, but rather it also has other culturally produced or socially produced elements that need to be taken into account. As far as my engagement with GIS is concerned, however, the basis of any GIS project is, of course, a gazetteer. As Sinai explained, and as you'll be hearing later from Valeria as well, a gazetteer is a database, a list of toponyms, place names, which are connected to different kinds of information, whether this is the different variants of names, of place names, or any chronological or historical data that may be relevant, or of any other sort, any kind of information that is connected to and related to a place name. GIS comes in when the geographic coordinates of a place name are required. In order to process any kind of data with GIS systems, you need geographic coordinates. So from my perspective, having a gazetteer which has place names with the geographic coordinates is the basis and the essential foundation for any spatial history or geographic information system project. So as someone who works on the Ottoman Empire, and through my own work, any gazetteer that I've compiled was essentially based on the geographical region that I worked on. What I and every other digital humanities colleague in Ottoman studies would like to have is an Ottoman gazetteer, which at the moment does not exist. So I've used Recogito as an educational tool and as a way to think about how we can construct an Ottoman gazetteer, a gazetteer for the Ottoman Empire. I started using that in the context of a class, the Spatial History Seminar at Boğaziçi University last year. The seminar had two dimensions. One was more theoretical, so it was about thinking about space in more conceptual ways. And then it had a more hands-on dimension, which was introducing Recogito to students. A very good way to get the students to learn and familiarize themselves with Recogito was actually getting them to translate the Recogito tutorial in Turkish, thereby making it available to millions of users in Turkey, a huge country, but also making them aware of the nitty-gritty details of how Recogito works through this very hands-on experience. Then each student would choose a particular historical text, any kind of historical text, and use Recogito to identify the place names that are mentioned in the text, any other kind of qualitative or quantitative data that is related to that place name, and then cartographically represent the map those attestations. We started from very basic kinds of obvious, let's say, kinds of text, so travelers' accounts, later one of our students mapped a part of the Ibn Battuta text, or other kinds of Ottoman travelogues, but the more imaginative and interesting projects were from students who mapped information on mapped information on pious endowments, vakufs, for those of you familiar with Islamic culture or societies. These are pious endowments that are created by anyone interested. It's an institution, essentially, it's a foundation, essentially, an endowment which cannot be confiscated and is akin to private property. So a lot of people, powerful people in the Ottoman Empire especially, used this institution to donate a lot of fixed or movable assets. And one of these projects precisely mapped the locations that the person who made the endowment chose to make those dedications. And from then on, he could extract conclusions about what the relationship was with that place, what the intention was, basically kind of spatial information that cannot be, that is not discernible, that is not obvious unless we put them on a map. Another project was, another very interesting project was by a student who mapped the readers' letters of the first Ottoman women's magazine. So there we have other kinds of information that is interesting and could be added into the equation for analysis. So the kinds of topics they discussed, the social, economic, cultural, political, military, gender affairs that were raised in these letters that concerned those particular the authors of those letters and the readers of the magazine. And again, Recogito gave us the opportunity to really see spatial connections that would otherwise be lost. Having used this in a smaller class that was essentially a postgraduate seminar, I decided to move Recogito to a bigger undergraduate class. I was asked by my department to teach a class in historical methods, and rather than the standard quantitative methods course that was usually taught in this context, I decided to offer an introduction to digital humanities and spatial history, part of which was also using Recogito. There I taught two sections of 30 and 35 students respectively. And there it was a much more consistently used educational tool, let's say. I used 3 different texts as exercises for the students. One was Around the World in 80 Days by Jules Verne. So a kind of more fun introduction to Recogito, and a historical source, albeit from literature, of course, but nevertheless still a historical source that would really force students to think about space and the kind of places that appear, and how they annotate them, how they categorize everything, and how choosing a place name, and the other objective was to show students to realize that choosing a place is no easy affair, is no simple affair. One has to think very carefully which gazetteer they use, what kind of information they include, what other extrapolations they make, how they tag different kinds of information in the text, so on and so forth. So the first text was Around the World in 80 Days. Then I used another classic historical text, Muqaddimah, the Prolegomena by Ibn Khaldun, a massive medieval text on the treatise on the Mediterranean. So a toponym-rich text that was close to the kind of historical text that we use and teach in my university, related to Middle Eastern and Ottoman history. And then finally, I used as a way of trying to see what kind of Ottoman historical sources we can use to extract toponymic data in order to build an Ottoman gazetteer. I decided to use a very particular source, the so-called registers of important affairs, which contained summaries of imperial orders dispatched to the Ottoman provinces. So obviously a toponym rich another toponym-rich text, which the students again annotated. And there the challenge, of course, in a place like the Ottoman Empire or the post-Ottoman lands at large, the challenge is to find the place names where which have experienced such radical and dramatic changes over time. All the states that emerged out of the Ottoman Empire pursued ethnic or linguistic cleansing policies regarding place names, therefore tracing back the genealogy of a present-day toponym as it would appear in gazetteers like geonames or even Pleiades is no simple affair. So the purpose there again was to teach students to be very precise, to be very careful about how they find, how they seek information on toponyms and how they incorporate it into their research. These two teaching experiences led me to the Ottoman Recogito project, which pursued the try to map and extract all the toponyms from one volume of a particular volume of the registers of important affairs, and I'll be showing you now the outcome of this exercise. Let me share my screen. So I hope this is working.
Yes, we can see
okay.
that.
So basically, what you see here are about 1,000 place names that we had able to identify in the particular source and annotate on the map. So you can see that it's pretty representative of the Ottoman Empire as well as other regions which the Ottoman Empire had relations with. As you can see, France or Spain or Portugal or parts of Western Europe are also appear in the map for the simple reason that they are mentioned in the particular text. Let me stop sharing. Okay, so having had this kind of three trial experiences actually at the classroom for the purposes of educational, for showing students how to teach, how to use Recogito as a research resource, was also a learning process for myself and for my own research, and that was the Ottoman Recogito project that I just showed you, starting with a particular volume of this vast collection, the purpose of which is to build towards a gazetteer for the Ottoman world. So that should be it from my behalf. I'd be happy to answer any questions now or later.
Okay, thank you very much, Antonis. Really interesting to hear about these different types of sources. Any questions at the moment? There is a possibility for those who are watching on YouTube live also to ask questions there on the chat. But I don't see any questions at this moment, so maybe we will turn to Valeria.
Okay, thank you. Thank you all. That was really good. So if now the people listening are very enthusiastic about using Recogito themselves, I'm gonna give a very brief demo. As I said before, I'm not gonna go too much into detail. That also because we have discussed Recogito annotation with Recogito before. So if you want to go a little bit deeper into it, feel free to check the previous seasons of Sunoikisis's digital classics and find the classes on geographic annotation with Recogito. So I'm just going to show you very, very quickly that really the basic of how Recogito works on text. We will focus only on text and only on geographic annotation. And I will spend a little bit more time on the new features as promised. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, so this is the new interface, or if it is the first time that you look at Recogito, this is just the interface. And Recogito is a free online platform. You just need to create your account and you can start annotating straight away. The way that Recogito works, basically, you upload your own documents on Recogito, so it creates, in most cases, definitely for text, it creates a copy of the document, and then you can annotate it, and then you decide what to do with the document. If you want to share it with other named people, with other users, if you want to make it public, if you want to keep it private, there are various options. We might have the time to go quickly through that, but just think roughly like a Google Doc, for example. You can choose how public that can be. Here on the left, you find basically information on your account and your documents. These are the documents that you have uploaded, and here in this section you find I've been logged off. Just a sec. Sorry about that. Whoa. These are the documents that other users have shared with me. Let's go back to mine. And here are, some simple statistics, but let's look at our documents. So how do you upload a document? And just quickly, you can see by the icon that we have different kinds of documents. We can upload text, we can upload images, we can upload spreadsheets, but we are focusing on text today. So to upload a new document, you just click on New, and you see you have, at the moment, these three options. One is to upload a single file. One is to create a folder so that you can organize your documents together, you can group them together. And this is, if you're working on IIIF collections, you can just upload the manifest and have, and then you can work on your IIIF images directly. The creation of folders that we can, create a beautiful Sunoikisis folder. It would be here, and here you could, move, I don't know, various documents that you want to move there. You just drop them there. They would be uploaded, and they will. They will actually become a single document. We'll see that later. You will also be able later on to just move your documents in the folder, but not just right now. Okay, let's try uploading a single document. You just drag and drop it, and we are, in this case, uploading. Okay, that was quick. We just uploaded the History of Peloponnesian War, the 6th book by Thucydides. So you see that here we have the name of the file. If we want, something that looks a little bit more neat, we go into the metadata from the document setting, and we add the information, and maybe we change the title and so on, and then we save the changes. If you have used Recogito before, you may remember that one of the things that Recogito does when you upload a document is to perform is to run an NER algorithm. NER stands for named entity recognition, and it's that automated process that Sinai was talking about. The new interface actually lets you decide if you want to run it or not, and gives you a few more options. And the way to access them is to select a document, and then from the options go into named entity recognition. The older Recogito only had an NER that would work with the English language, and it was very unsatisfactory, not just for Hebrew or Arabic, but for a number of European languages as well. We have added French, German, and Spanish. And I think that we would be, if you have trained an algorithm or if you know about an NER algorithm for place names in other languages, we would be very, very interested in talking about that. But these are the options at the moment. And because our document is translated into English, we'll leave it in English. Another thing that we can tweak here is that we can choose what are the gazetteers that we want to use. You might have seen before in Sinai, during Sinai's talk, that when she was annotating place names, and we will do that as well, when you annotate a place, Recogito gives you a number of suggestions on what that place might be, and it takes these suggestions from a number of gazetteers. Now, it's great that there is a richness of gazetteers, because users might be interested in different periods of times or different historical moments. But if you're working, for example, in ancient texts like we are, maybe you're not massively interested in the results, for example, from the historical gazetteer of Spanish America. So maybe we can tick this off. As well as the map of early modern London or these other projects. We could also get rid of geonames, which is the contemporary gazetteer, and it usually creates more confusion than anything else, but it's also a good backup for the places that do not appear neither in Pleiades nor in Dare, that is the digital atlas of the Roman Empire. So once we have selected our algorithm and the gazetteers that we want to be included in our suggestions, we just hit Start NER. But because this may take a couple of minutes and time is precious, we go into a version of the same file where we have already run the NER. And this is how it looks like. There are some words that have been recognized, and they are great because the algorithm thinks they are either place names or people names, but they need to be checked. They need to be controlled by an actual user. So let's click on Sicily, for example. So Recogito is telling us, yeah, I think it is Sicily, but as it is in geonames, and it's saying it's an automatic match. So, well, don't trust it too much. What do you want to do? So this association is somehow correct because it is indeed Sicily, the part of Italy, but at the same time, we don't really want Sicily in geonames. We want to be more precise. We want it to be Sicily in Pleiades, because the Sicily that Thucydides is talking about, it's very much closer to Sicily that it's modeled in Pleiades. So we click on change, and we get a number of suggestions, and we can also see on the map where the suggestions are. And this is the one that we want, Sicilia Island. We select it, then we click again, and we see that the annotation has changed. It's now associated to the URI in Pleiades and not in geonames anymore. It's not an automatic match anymore. It has my name, it has a timestamp. And we can click OK. Now, Recogito is telling me that there are 79 more occurrences of Sicily. Do we want to reapply this annotation? We will see a number of options to deal with this. The this feature that is called the bulk annotation can actually be very, very useful for for reapplying the same annotation. Of course, it has to be managed with a certain care, and it used to be just a simple yes or no, but now we have some more options that I'm going to show you in a moment. For the time, let's just say yes, because this is a quite easy one. We want, all the occurrences of Sicily in this text to be the Sicily island in the Pleiades Gazetteer. So this is an easy one. So we are clicking yes and merge existing annotation. This means that the previous annotation that would say that Sicily was actually geonames will disappear, and they will all be changed to Sicily in Pleiades. So you see that all the Sicilies are now green, which means they have been checked, and they are all Sicily in the Pleiades Gazetteer. If I want to, for example, add a tag, which is something very useful in the process of annotation, to group your, to refine, let's say, your annotation the way that Antonis and Sinai were talking about before, we could say, I don't know, for example, I'm going to be very, very banal. It's just an example. Let's say that we want to say that this is an island. This is the way that you create tags. You just write into this field and then click enter. And when you see it in the box, it means that you have created a tag. You can also add comments, of course. You can add links to external resources, or just personal comments about the methodology that you're using, or the reasons why you're using a tag instead of another. If I say OK, Recogito asks me if I want to also apply the tag to all the previous annotations. I just want quickly to show you the advanced options. I could have just said yes, but I wanted to show you the advanced option. So one of the things that is by default, but we might want to change, is that the match requires the full word match. It means that the word Sicily that we are annotating has to be surrounded by either white space or a punctuation mark. So it will be a strict match, not a generous kind of match. But we can change that if, for whatever reason, our annotation, we want to also, get, for example, the adjective, like, I don't know, yes, the place name and the adjective that is related to it. We are applying it to the annotated matches. And what are we doing? We have these three choices. We could just append our new thing, that is just the tag, to the existing annotation. So we will have the entity match that says that place is Sicily in Pleiades, plus we are appending the tag. Or we could replace the annotations altogether. In this case, it wouldn't make any difference. Or we can even, manage the things separately. So we can add the new tag, but also replace the entity match. And if this sounds, confusing, just look here. This is what you will get in all the occurrences, in all the 79 occurrences. If this is not what you want, then you have to choose another option. So all the entities that we are annotating will have an entity match with Pleiades, and will have the tag island. And we apply the changes. So now, yeah, all of them will have the tag island. After we have done a lot of annotations, we can use possibly the most useful feature in Recogito, which is visualizing your annotations on the map, which is useful for a number of reasons, not least to spot mistakes. And for example, we can definitely see that this Italy, with these very neat borders, is definitely not the Italy that Thucydides might have been thinking of. So we want to change this. We don't want it to be geonames, so we go back to the text. And we use again the bulk annotation to say, no, change this, and make it Italia from Pleiades. Okay. Yeah, so we want to merge the existing annotations. And now when we go to the map, we can see that, you know, those ridiculous borders have disappeared. So to look at the composite document, if you just drop more than one document together at the same time, they will become one single document. Let's say if you upload a number of files together, they will become a single document, which is what I did, creating this Annibal meta document that I created, uploading at the same time Livy and Pelagios account of the Second Punic War. And you see that if you go into the metadata, you have metadata for the bundle document, let's say, but you also have metadata for the single part of the document. And the interesting thing about this is that your annotations then, and please bear in mind that these annotations are automatic. I haven't checked anything, or almost anything. So the annotations that you see here, they come from both the documents, and you can use the various annotation, the various visualization options, for example, to visualize them by part. And you would see what are those that are mentioned by Pelagios and those that are mentioned by Livy, and the white ones are those that are mentioned by both. Not a lot of overlap. And another thing that I wanted to show you is that, well, check your matches, because there is always some place in the United States that is called like, yeah, Jupiter or Utica, or, you know, there are a lot of places in the Americas that are called like ancient places. So always check your matches. Let's go back quickly to the interface. One quick thing that I wanted to show you is that at this point we are just visualizing the title, the author, and when it was loaded and when it was last edited. But you can change here the fields that you see in the interface. You can add, for example, the number of annotations or the verification ratio that would show you know, how many of those annotations, you know, are actually have actually been checked. Okay, I want to talk a little bit more about the relations feature that Sinai mentioned, and I will do it with yet another copy of our History of Peloponnesian War. And to create relation, I have changed the color code. So now we're seeing the entities coded by entity type. So the blue are supposed to be people, although there might still be some mistakes, and the green are places. And these things that you see between the entities are the relations. The relations are created quite easily. You just select relations. You can only connect entities that have been already annotated. So you cannot connect the bits of text that are not entities. But once they are entities, you just drag, you know, and drop connecting two of them. You have the same interface as for creating tags, and then you define the relationship, and then you click enter. And you see there is an arrow. That means that the relationship is directional. So we are saying that this, you know, is, you know, in this case, you know, same as it's a pretty much, you know, bidirectional relationship, but it's not always the case. So we want the relations to remain directional. And here I've spent some time trying to annotate the relationship between the people that lived in Sicily at the beginning, according to Thucydides. And so I've just used the relations to say, who lived where, with whom, and who drove away whom, and things like that, thinking that it could have been, interesting to understand and visualize what were the relationship between these people. Now, the thing about relations in Recogito when you are annotating a text is that, well, first of all, I think they are quite helpful in exploring the text, and that was very useful for me. So to just help me doing a close reading of the text. But also, you may want to actually use them to extract the relationship and visualize the relationship, bearing in mind that there are some limitations, but we will look at those as well. So if you wanted, for example, to extract these relations and use them to create a graph, let's say a kind of network analysis graph, then you could use from the download options the notes and edges format that is particularly thought to be compatible with the Gephi software, if you're familiar with it. If you're not familiar with it, I'm not really a Gephi person, but I have linked in the exercise a very simple tutorial that you can just follow step by step. It's very quick, and this is a graph representation, a network representation of exactly the things that I have annotated in Recogito. So I could see who the Iberians were related to and so on. And I repeat, I'm not a Gephi person, so this graph is not great. I'm sure that you can do better, but this is just to show that if you think that is useful, there is a direct link between creating and annotating relations in a text using Recogito, and then you can download them and upload the nodes and edges straight into Gephi, and then tweak the visualization according to the colors, the thickness, and everything else that is most convenient to you. And I want to actually show you the format. Notes and edges. They're just basically two very simple table of data, and I am opening them because I want to talk about, yes, it's the notes that actually we need. I want to talk a little bit about the limitation of this function in Recogito, which is that each time that I create an annotation, the entity will receive an ID. That ID is unique to each relations. Which means that, for example, in the exercise that I showed you, I always used the same occurrence of the word Sicily to express the relationships of the populations with the island. If I had used, let's say, this occurrence of the word Sicily to talk about, the Achaeans, just because it was closer in the text, that is, of course, possible, but then this Sicily would receive a different ID from this Sicily. And this is something that you need to bear in mind if you are doing the relations, that you need to clean up the data afterwards. And if you have, for example, two Sicily with two different IDs, you need to consolidate those a little bit, as Sinai was saying about using OpenRefine, but you just do it more simply by hand, but you need to consolidate all the occurrences of the same entity. This is, of course, a limitation of the relations feature, but at the same time, I think that it's quite unique to be able to go from these annotation format to the network format. And I see that I don't have much time left. I just wanted to show one last thing that, again, I don't usually show very often, which is the fact that if the gazetteer allow, which is not always the case, Recogito is able to show annotations at the intra-city level. And we have a city gazetteer into Recogito, that is the map of early modern London, that is a gazetteer of, that's pretty explicit, of early modern London. But also in Pleiades, there are quite, in the Vitale Gazetteer as well, there are quite a few entries for places within Pompeii and within Rome and within other larger cities. It's not complete, it's not systematic. I think the most systematic thing is actually Pompeii, but there are some ideas there that can be used, and I just want to show you very quickly an annotation of this dreadful book that is called The Last Days of Pompeii, that, I mean, the author thought that they were writing with the very, very, let's say, sound archaeological knowledge of Pompeii. So they really liked to cite existing places in Pompeii that the tourist could be able to recognize while reading. And I just wanted to very, very quickly show you that we can zoom in into Pompeii and basically switch to modern place that relies on OpenStreetMap, and then you have quite a fairly granular map of Pompeii, and you can see where my annotations, which are green, the green dots, are exactly located. You could even follow the protagonist of that dreadful novel around what was known of Pompeii at the time. These are just the dimensions of the Temple of Isis in that particular novel. Okay, I think I will stop here so that I can allow people to ask questions. And as I said, this was really a brief. I'm still screen sharing, am I? Okay, not anymore. This was a really quick walkthrough. Recogito, just mostly to introduce some new features. Feel free to check out either the existing resources on the Pelagios website or the previous Sunoikisis classes. And thank you, Maria and Gabi, and that was all from me.
Okay, thank you very much, Valeria, and Antonis and Sinai also. This is quite a fascinating world. And especially the relations was a very interesting feature there. I will first ask if anybody else has questions before I ask mine. Okay, Gabi has something.
I have a small question, which is a question partly for Valeria and possibly partly for Sinai, who may know Open Refine better, or anyone who can answer this question. So looking at the edges and nodes that you export from Recogito, if you've annotated 3 different Sicilies, either by accident or because that's what you wanted to do in your actual tagging of relationships, and then you try to export that as nodes and edges, and then you try to consolidate those. It strikes me you could use Open Annotation to do that. That might actually speed that up a fair bit. But you would have 2 tables that you needed to consolidate, right? Because you would not only have to take all of the 3 or 19 or however many different Sicilies in the nodes table and turn them all into one. Then you would have to take all the references to any of those Sicilies that, other than the one that you wanted to keep, in the edges table and change those as well. Is that something that Open Annotation could do for you? Can it take 2 tables that are linked to each other and consolidate both together? Sorry, Open Refine.
That's definitely for Sinai.
Well, Open Annotation, I'm not.
Sorry, I was Refine. I kept on saying annotation by mistake.
Ah, okay. Okay. So I'm afraid you'll have to repeat the question then, and I'll think about Open or Refine.
If you have two different tables, but you want to refine both of them in relation to each other.
Yeah.
So you have 9 different Sicilies in one table, and you want to consolidate them into one. Can you also consolidate all the references to those 9 Sicilies in the other table to a single identifier?
Yes, in OpenRefine, there's actually a new version of OpenRefine that has, I mean, you could do it before, it was just more cumbersome.
Right.
I'll just open any table, and what you could do is reconcile to, or actually connect. It's a kind of join that you do between tables, and then
well, we don't necessarily need to solve it now. Just
yeah, I see. It wouldn't open so quickly, but basically, yeah, you could connect the two tables, and then whatever you need is whatever you do, you can do it for both projects.
To carry across. That sounds really cool. So that actually makes the relationships feature of Recogito even more useful, doesn't it? I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Specifically, it's in the column edit options, and then you just do add column from different projects, and then you can do your cleaning on that.
Brilliant. Thanks very much.
I actually had a couple of questions. One to Valeria. I saw that you shared your projects with an open license, and which I also intend to do on at least some of them. And I was wondering, where can you see these projects that are out there? Do you need to have a link to them, or is there a place where I can go and see all the?
You talk about the annotated the things in Recogito?
Yeah.
Okay. There are various levels of making things public in Recogito, and one is that everyone with the link can find it. So people would need the link, and another possibility is that it's just public. And if it is just public, then it would show up even in a Google search or any kind of search.
Mm-hmm.
So those that have been made public in that way, they can be just found with a very simple search. What we really are missing, but I know that it will be there by the end of the year, it's an internal Recogito search. So that in Recogito, you search all the documents that have been annotated in Recogito that people want other people to know about.
Yes.
So let's say at the moment it's still a little bit hybrid, but yeah, if you make a document open to all to find, then it will show up in Google.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I also have a question to Antonis. I was wondering about the languages you worked on, because you mentioned Ibn Khaldun and Ibn Battuta also. So were these translations or in the Arabic?
Yeah, I mean, since I was working with undergraduate students, I worked with the English translations of text.
English translations. Oh.
English translations, yes. But when we did the registers of important affairs, we used the Ottoman transcriptions, which are published and available online in PDF format. There is an issue with encoding, in that Recogito only recognizes UTF-8, and certain Turkish characters do not appear correctly, but this is, I think, 3 or 4 characters or even less. So you quickly get used to whatever the funny character corresponds to the real one. So that's not, at least in our case, that wasn't a problem. The other thing that's quite useful, and it's something I should add now that we're talking about this, actually, The other thing that was quite useful for Ottoman was the fact that various places have multiple names. So think of the equivalent of Venice being called Serenissima. Now Recogito, associates a string of letters with a particular web page as a unique resource identifier, as Valeria mentioned earlier. So it doesn't always have to be Venice. So this is another thing that one has to keep in mind. Different combinations of strings of letters can be associated with the same URI.
Mhm.
Or the other thing that's very, very common in Ottoman is to use the words the aforementioned place, the above mentioned place, so on and so forth. So again, this is another sort of hidden challenge, as it were, some difficulties in annotating such text that you can only realize by experience. And that was why it was so useful dealing with this with students first, so that you have this feedback and interactive relationship in identifying all these issues.
Thank you.
Can I also continue with this sort of language question? Because when Valeria was showing the named entity recognition, you had English, French, Spanish, and German.
Yes.
But is it possible to do the named entity recognition also with Greek and Latin?
No. It kind of works on Latin, but Greek wouldn't get anything. But if you do have, or if you know someone that is developing an NER trained on ancient Greek place names, as I said, it's not difficult to add another option for the NER, and we know that half of our community of users are people that work with the ancient world. So why not? Do you have one?
No, I wasn't meaning that. It was completely a question. Yeah.
Sorry, was the question to me? Because I just dropped out and no.
No.
Sorry.
No problem. Also with the relations, did you have a sort of tag list there that you are using all the time, or do you make things up as you go in a way? Because you have these, Trojans were driven away from some place and these things like that.
In the exercise that students will find in the page, I very much encourage them to create a schema, a graph, even a simple one of what are the relations that they're going to look into and how do they relate to each other. To be honest with you, that was just a quick thing that I did for an exercise, so it's not very well thought through, but yes, I think that the best way to use relations is to know the text first, at least in the general lines, and knowing what are you looking at, because you cannot just create relationships of everything with everything. You need to stay focused on one particular aspect or one particular family, at least, of relationships. Otherwise, it would be too confused. Wouldn't be particularly informative in general. So yeah, I would strongly recommend to think about the relations that are interesting, that are relevant to your research first. And then from a technical point of view, if just to avoid basically typos and things like that, if you have used the same tag before, the same relations before, when you start typing, Recogito will auto-suggest the completion. But there is not a set of tags that you can choose from. It just recognizes if you're using again something that you've used already in the same document.
And you can't use URIs as relationship types, I take it.
I think you could. Why not?
Just by typing it as a string.
Yeah.
But it wouldn't be aware of the ontology or anything.
No, it would just be. But I mean, for some people, it would be useful to just do it that way.
But then, of course, you could use the tag, the literal tag in Recogito, and then replace it, for example, in OpenRefine very easily with your ontology.
As well, yeah.
Okay. Are there any more questions or comments on geographic annotation? Well, we are perfectly on time, I would say. Not much overlap. So thank you very, very much, all three, Valeria, Sinai, and Antonis, for presenting us.
Thank you.
Next week, we are still talking about annotation, but it's linking and annotating secondary materials.
We'll also be using Recogito for that, but we'll be using some of the features that Valeria and the others have deliberately not mentioned today, such as the annotating of images and annotating things other than places, annotating things that we don't have gazetteers for, we don't have vocabularies for, just to sort of focus on me, if you like, to see what we might be able to want to annotate in things. But we'll talk about that next week.
Okay, yes, thank you. So I think it's a good place to end here. Thank you very much for joining, and bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you for the invitation.